Welcome back to Artificial Evidence, the podcast where the algorithm knows more than it should. I'm your host, Owen Carver. Today, we're stepping into the misty forests of the Pacific Northwest, into a logging town that hides a dark and bloody history. Over decades, the Old Pine Sawmill saw more than timber pass through its gates. It became the epicenter of a chilling series of murders that haunted the town of Clearwood, Oregon. Join me as we trace the threads of a mystery spanning generations and unravel the sinister truth hidden deep in the woods. Clearwood, Oregon is one of those towns that seems frozen in time. Tucked into a valley surrounded by towering pines, it's a place where the air smells like sawdust and rain, and the sound of logging trucks echoes through the hills. The Old Pine Sawmill was the beating heart of this town. For nearly a century, it employed generations of workers, turning massive logs into lumber that built cities across the country. But beneath its rugged charm, the mill held a sinister secret. The first tragedy struck in the summer of 1973. A foreman named David Langston failed to show up for his shift one Monday morning. His co-workers assumed he'd had too much to drink the night before, a common occurrence in the logging town. But when days passed with no sign of him, the sheriff's department was called. David's body was found deep in the forest, not far from the mill. His throat had been slashed, and his body bore marks that suggested a brutal struggle. The murder shocked the tight-knit community, but the investigation led nowhere. There were whispers of old grudges, illicit affairs, and debts owed to dangerous people, but no one came forward with anything concrete. Over the years, life at the mill returned to normal, or at least it seemed to, but the shadow of David Langston's murder lingered. Then, in 1981, it happened again. A mill worker named Ellen Hart disappeared during her night shift. Her co-workers assumed she'd left early, but her car was still in the lot when the morning crew arrived. Days later, her remains were discovered in a shallow grave near the river. Like David, she had been savagely attacked. This time, the town couldn't ignore the pattern. Some blamed outsiders, drifters passing through Clearwood. Others whispered about the mill itself, claiming it was cursed. But the sheriff insisted it was nothing more than coincidence. The murders stopped for a time, and the town's fear began to fade. But in 1994, the body of yet another worker, Charlie Dorsey, was found in the mill's wood chipper. The gruesome discovery left little doubt. Someone was killing mill employees. The investigation into Charlie's death revealed startling inconsistencies. A torn work glove found near the chipper matched his size but was clean of blood, suggesting it had been planted. Witnesses reported seeing someone in a dark coat leaving the mill shortly before Charlie's body was discovered. Yet again, the case went cold, and the town's unease deepened. By the 2000s, the Old Pine Sawmill was on its last legs. The logging industry had slowed, and the mill was downsized, then shuttered. It became a ghostly relic, its machinery rusting under layers of moss and decay. For most of Clearwood, the mill was a place to be avoided, a reminder of the horrors that had unfolded there. But in 2015, the sawmill's shadow re-emerged when hikers discovered human remains in one of the abandoned log yards. DNA analysis identified the victim as Clara Jensen, a young woman who had disappeared in the early 1970s. She had no connection to the mill, but the method of her death, blunt force trauma and burial in an unmarked grave, fit the pattern of the mill murders. The discovery of Clara's body breathed new life into the investigation. A team of cold case detectives was brought in, armed with modern forensic tools and a mandate to solve the mystery once and for all. They began by re-examining the victims' lives, searching for a common thread. What they found was chilling. Each of the victims had ties to a man named Leonard Len Briggs, a former mill supervisor known for his fiery temper and controlling behavior. Len had died in 1997, but his name appeared repeatedly in old personnel files, witness statements, and local gossip. Then came the breakthrough. A set of old ledgers from the mill revealed a series of suspicious payments made to Len's personal account. Investigators followed the money trail, which led them to a storage unit in a neighboring town. Inside, they found a collection of macabre trophies, items belonging to each of the mill's victims. The evidence seemed conclusive, but there was one problem. Len couldn't have killed Clara Jensen. He didn't work at the mill until the late 1970s, years after her disappearance. The case took a new turn when DNA from Clara's remains was cross-referenced with a database of suspects. The results pointed to a man named Henry Walsh, a retired logger who had worked alongside Len in the 70s. Henry had been a quiet, unassuming presence in the town, never drawing suspicion. But under questioning, his facade cracked. Henry confessed to Clara's murder, describing it as a crime of passion. But when asked about the other victims, he denied any involvement, claiming those killings were Len's doing. Investigators were left with an unsettling conclusion. Clearwood had been home to not one but two killers, operating independently, yet bound by the mill's dark history. To this day, the murders at the Old Pine Sawmill remain a subject of speculation and dread in Clearwood. Was Len Briggs the true mastermind, or did he serve as a convenient scapegoat? Were there others involved, their crimes still hidden among the pines? One thing is certain, the sawmill's legacy is more than just timber and toil. It's a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk even in the most unassuming places. This has been another episode of Artificial Evidence. Thank you for listening, and remember, the algorithm knows.